My father betrayed me in the worst way, and my mother hid the truth. This is how I survived. I have carried that sentence in my chest for so long that sometimes it feels like a stone. My father, the man whose hands once lifted me to reach the highest shelf, whose laugh used to fill our small kitchen, became the reason I learned to hide. It is hard to say those words out loud, even now, because the name that should have meant safety became the first place my fear lived. When I was a child, I trusted him without question. When he changed, the world around me shifted beneath my feet, and I did not know how to stand. They tell you that the people you love will protect you. They do not tell you sometimes the ones you love can also break you. My mother remarried because life had closed too many doors on her. She wanted warmth again, someone to share the bills, the meals, the small joys. To her, his presence was answer and relief. To me, it was a slow, sinking tide that wrapped around my small days and pulled the color out of them. I remember the first time I saw the way he looked at me and felt a chill run through my spine. At first, I could not name the fear. Children do not have words for many dangers. So I kept quiet and pretended everything was ordinary. But ordinary became impossible. The little things grew heavier. The way doors clicked behind him, the way he tried to sit closer when the house was supposed to be quiet, the way his voice softened when men were near and hardened when only I was there. Each small act pressed like a thumb on a bruise that would not fade. I told my mother once, in the trembling voice of a child trying to be brave. I told her I felt uncomfortable, that I did not like the way he followed me from room to room. Her face flattened, and a hardness came over her I had not seen before. "You will not speak ill of your father," she told me, as if the title alone could change what I felt. "You must respect the man who makes a home for us." And the next day, she locked my door. Being locked away in your own home is a peculiar kind of cruelty. The walls are familiar. The bed is the same. The world beyond the window exists. But none of it is for you. I learned to live in the rustle of curtains and the slant of light that fell on the floor for a few minutes each afternoon. I learned to quiet my laughter so it would not be a crime, to pad my steps and speak only when spoken to. When his steps came down the hallway, my breath would hitch and my whole body would become a small animal, listening for a predator's next move. If you ask me now what hurt more, the things he did or the way my mother turned away, the answer is the way betrayal multiplies. A wound from a stranger might heal with time. A wound from the one who was supposed to be your shield becomes a map of new fears. I was told I had brought shame on the house. Those words were sharp enough to cut. She shut the door not because she feared for me, but because she feared what the neighbors would say. In her counting of reputation and survival, I was a liability. There were nights when I thought it would end only when I ended. I lay awake and listened to the household breathe, counting the sounds like prayers. But even in the darkest hours, a small, impossible hope can begin to beat. A rhythm so quiet you almost miss it. It was my siblings who became that rhythm for me. They were young, messy, not yet filled with the caution the world forces into people, and their eyes noticed what mine could not always bear. My brother once slipped a note under my door, so small I almost missed it. "We know. We are with you." Those 3 lines saved me as if someone had opened my chest and let air in. From that night on, we were conspirators in a secret no one else in our house could guess. They watched his patterns, learned the times he would leave his drink unattended, the way he guarded his phone and his temper. They were not detectives by training, only by necessity, but they became careful in a way I had not seen them before. We started to collect small things, evidence of the way he would cross a boundary, of his cruel temper when thwarted, of the way my mother flinched when his name came up. In the safety of whispers, we built a case out of broken habits and witness statements. Neighbors who had heard shouting, an aunt who remembered him making a crude joke once too often, the fact that my mother had taken to avoiding me in public. It took time, but time was the one thing our side had. The day we acted was the coldest of that winter. Snow lay thick on the windowsill, and the world outside made a white, silent hush. My brother and sister moved like shadows, steady and sure. They had a plan that fit together with the careful clumsiness of people who had never needed to plan an escape before. They unlocked my door, not with the fury of a dramatic rescue, but with the delicate care of people who knew the cost of small noises. When I walked out into the kitchen, the night after my siblings freed me from that locked room, I lay awake on a thin mattress at my aunt's house. For the first time in months, the door beside me did not rattle with unwanted hands. I should have slept deeply, but freedom can be just as heavy as captivity when you don't know what comes next. My chest rose and fell quickly, as though my body still expected danger. Every creak of the wooden floor, every gust of wind against the shutters, made my heart leap. Trauma does not loosen its grip in one night. It clings like frost to glass. But I was not alone anymore. My brother slept, curled up beside the door, as though guarding it with his small frame. My sister whispered in the dark, "You're safe now, I promise." Those words became my anchor, fragile but real. Morning came with a storm inside our house. My stepfather had discovered my absence, and his voice thundered through the neighborhood. He accused me of dishonoring him, of poisoning my mother's mind. I remember peeking through the crack of my aunt's window and seeing him outside, shouting at anyone who would listen. His face was twisted in rage, but I also saw fear there, fear that his mask might finally break. The neighbors began to whisper. You see, people often know more than they admit. They had seen the way he watched me, the way I flinched when he drew near. They had ignored it because it was easier to pretend. But once the whispers started, they grew like wildfire. My aunt gathered those whispers, pulling them close, weaving them into something stronger. Evidence, testimony, truth that could no longer be silenced. My mother came to see me. I remember that day as though it happened yesterday. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She looked at me, and for the first time in a long while, she did not look away. She sat at the edge of my bed and said nothing for what felt like hours. Finally, her voice broke the silence. I should have listened. I should have believed you. I wanted to scream at her, to ask why she had chosen him over me, why she had shut her daughter in darkness instead of protecting her. But the words stuck in my throat. I only managed, "You left me alone." She wept then, not the quiet tears of a guilty wife, but the deep sobs of a mother who realized too late the damage she had allowed. I do not know if I forgave her in that moment. Forgiveness is not a switch you flip. It is a slow, jagged path. But I saw her regret, and it softened something in me. The days that followed were filled with confrontation. My siblings, though young, stood by me with a courage that shone brighter than the fear in my chest. My aunt spoke loudly, publicly, accusing my stepfather of being a predator. Some believed her, some didn't. That is the way of the world. Truth is never accepted by all. But enough people began to see, enough people began to whisper that perhaps the story they had been told about our perfect household was not the real one. One evening, as the snow fell in heavy silence, my stepfather tried to confront me. He came to the edge of the yard where I was standing with my brother. His eyes were wild, his words dripping with venom. He said I was a liar, that I had ruined his reputation, that I would pay for it. My brother, barely more than a boy, stood in front of me like a wall. He clenched his fists and shouted back, "You will never touch her again." It was a small act, but to me, it was the bravest thing I had ever seen. For the first time, someone defended me out loud. I trembled, but I did not hide behind my brother. I stepped forward and said, with a voice I didn't know I had, "You cannot silence me anymore." The truth is already out. The words surprised even me. They were not shouted, not angry, but steady. And in that moment, I saw his power begin to crumble. He had built his strength on fear and silence, and I had just taken both away. Of course, the road was not smooth after that. There were trials, not in a courtroom, but in the court of family and community. Some relatives blamed me. Some said I should have stayed quiet, that it would have been easier. Some even defended him, clinging to the image of the respectable man they thought they knew. Those words hurt, but they no longer defined me. Because I had found a voice, and I had siblings who echoed it beside me. The years that followed were not simple. My mother lived with guilt. My siblings carried the weight of what they had witnessed, and I learned to rebuild a sense of self from the pieces he had shattered. But each year, I grew stronger. Each year, the shadows he cast became smaller. And now, as I sit before this fire with silver in my hair, I tell this story not as a victim, but as a survivor. I tell it because silence would let him win, and I have already given him too much of my life. I tell it because somewhere, another child may be sitting in a locked room, thinking no one will believe them, and I want them to know they are not alone. The nights grew colder, and so did the silence in the house. After everything I had endured, I felt like my voice no longer mattered. My stepfather still walked around with the same cruel smile. My mother avoided my eyes, and I was left with only my thoughts. Sometimes silence is heavier than screams. It presses down on you until you feel like you're suffocating. But one night, something unexpected happened. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered through the house. My feet led me to the old attic above the main room. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled of forgotten years. It was a place nobody visited, but for some reason, I felt drawn to it. Maybe it was the loneliness, or maybe destiny was calling me to discover a truth that had been buried for too long. I lit a small candle and began searching through the boxes stacked in the corners. Old clothes, broken toys, faded photographs. It felt like walking through ghosts of a past I never knew. And then, in a wooden chest at the back, I found it. A letter. The envelope was yellow with age, the ink fading but still readable. On the front, my real father's name was written. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single page, written in hurried handwriting. Greater than, if anything happens to me, know this. You cannot trust him. He is not the man he pretends to be. Protect our daughter from him at all costs. I froze. The word stabbed me deeper than any wound ever had. My father had known. He had tried to warn my mother. He had feared for me even before he was gone. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the letter to my chest. My stepfather wasn't just cruel by chance. It was who he truly was. My real father had seen it, and yet nobody had protected me. The betrayal felt endless. For hours, I sat in that attic, rocking back and forth, crying silently into the darkness. The letter was proof that I was never safe in this house, that my pain had been written in destiny long before it began. But it was also proof that I was not crazy, not guilty, not the one to blame. The next morning, I tried to show the letter to my mother. "Look," I whispered, my voice shaking. He knew. Father knew what kind of man he was. You should have listened. But before I could finish, she snatched the paper from my hand, her face pale with shock. "Where did you find this?" she demanded. "In the attic," I said, my voice breaking. "It's true, isn't it? You knew what he was capable of." Her eyes filled with tears, but instead of hugging me, instead of comforting me, she burned the letter in the fire. I screamed, reaching for it, but the flames devoured the paper quickly, turning my father's warning into ash. "Why did you do that?" I cried. "Because some truths are too dangerous," she whispered, refusing to meet my gaze. "You don't understand. He will destroy us all if this comes out." Her fear was real, but it felt like betrayal all over again. I had lost my father, lost my childhood, and now I had lost the only piece of truth that proved my suffering was not my imagination. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the ashes in the fireplace. But even though the letter was gone, its words were carved into my heart. "You cannot trust him. Protect our daughter." I repeated those words over and over, like a prayer, like a shield. For the first time in years, a spark of strength lit inside me. My father had tried to protect me, even in death. Now, it was my turn to protect myself. Days passed, and I began watching my stepfather more closely. I noticed things I had ignored before, the way he locked doors behind him, the way he whispered to my mother late at night, the way he kept secrets hidden in the cellar. My fear grew, but so did my determination. I started writing everything down in a notebook, every cruel word, every violent act, every lie. If nobody believed me, then one day these pages would speak for me. It was the only way I felt I could fight back. But one evening, as I sat by the window scribbling in my diary, I heard a creak outside my door. My heart stopped. When I looked up, my stepfather was standing there, his eyes fixed on the notebook in my lap. "What's that?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Nothing," I whispered, quickly closing it. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing the room. "Show me." I shook my head, clutching the diary to my chest like it was my soul. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he would rip it from my hands. But then he smiled, that cold, terrifying smile. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed, writing down lies to make me look like a monster. "Be careful, girl. Paper burns as easily as flesh." He left, but the threat lingered in the air like poison. That night, I couldn't sleep. My hands shook as I hid the notebook under a loose floorboard. My stepfather would destroy it if he found it. He would destroy me too. But something unexpected happened again. My younger brother, the night after the chaos, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a prison ready to collapse. My brother's courage had saved me from losing everything, but now we both lived under the shadow of danger. My stepfather's rage had reached a boiling point, and I knew he wouldn't stop until he destroyed every piece of my truth. For days, the tension was unbearable. Every time the floor creaked, I jumped. Every time his footsteps echoed in the hallway, I held my breath. My mother wandered the house like a ghost, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling. She knew the storm inside our home was growing, but she was too afraid to face it. It was during one of those silent evenings, sitting in the dim light of a candle, that my brother whispered, "We can't stay here anymore. We need to leave." His words hit me like lightning. Leave? The thought had always lived at the edge of my mind, but I had never dared to say it out loud. Where would we go? How could two children escape a man who controlled everything? But my brother's determination lit a spark inside me. Maybe leaving wasn't impossible. Maybe it was the only way to survive. That night, we began to plan. We whispered in hushed tones after everyone had fallen asleep. We mapped out the small windows of freedom when our stepfather went to town, when our mother was distracted, when the house grew quiet. I showed my brother where I had hidden the remaining scraps of my diary. Together, we packed them carefully into a cloth bag, like fragile pieces of our souls. But escape was not just about running, it was about courage. And courage is something that grows only when you feed it with hope. "I'll protect you," my brother said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Father wanted us to live free. If we don't fight back, we'll never be safe." His words reminded me of the letter, of my real father's desperate warning. The thought gave me strength. Our chance came one stormy evening. The rain pounded against the windows, and thunder shook the walls. My stepfather had left earlier, claiming he had business in town, though we both knew it was just an excuse to drink. We decided it was time. I tucked the diary pieces into my dress, while my brother filled a small sack with bread, water, and the little money he had stolen from the kitchen drawer. My heart pounded as we slipped out the back door, the cold rain soaking us instantly. The night air was sharp and unforgiving, but freedom smelled sweeter than fear. We ran through the muddy fields, our feet splashing in puddles, our breaths ragged. For the first time, the world felt vast, open, and full of possibilities. I almost believed we could make it. But hope is fragile, and sometimes fate waits in the shadows. Halfway across the fields, a lantern light cut through the rain. My stepfather's voice thundered in the darkness. "Where do you think you're going?" We froze, terror flooding our veins. He had followed us. My brother grabbed my hand. "Run!" We bolted toward the woods, the trees looming like black giants. Branches scratched our faces, roots tangled our feet, but we didn't stop. Behind us, his footsteps thundered closer, his curses echoing through the storm. "You can't escape me!" My lungs burned, my legs screamed for rest, but I pushed forward. Every step was survival, every breath was defiance. Finally, we stumbled into a small clearing, our bodies trembling, soaked and exhausted. My brother pulled me behind a fallen tree, urging me to stay quiet. We crouched there, clutching each other, listening as our stepfather's voice roared through the forest. "I'll find you. You're nothing without me. You'll crawl back to me, just like your mother." His words cut deeper than any knife. My mother. She had chosen fear over love, silence over truth, and now we were alone. Hours passed before the forest grew quiet again. We didn't sleep. We couldn't. Every sound felt like a threat, every shadow like a hand reaching for us. But as the first light of dawn painted the sky, my brother turned to me with a fierce determination I had never seen before. "We can't go back," he whispered. "Even if he doesn't find us today, he'll never stop. We have to keep running until someone listens to us." I nodded, my voice too broken to answer. The days that followed were a blur of hunger, exhaustion, and fear. We wandered from village to village, begging for food, hiding from strangers who asked too many questions. Most doors closed on us. Some eyes looked away in pity, others in suspicion. But then, in a small town at the edge of the valley, we met an old woman who listened. She was kind, her eyes filled with sorrow as she heard our story. "My child," she whispered, placing a hand on mine, "you have carried a burden too heavy for one soul. But the truth must come out. If you hide, the darkness wins. If you speak, maybe, just maybe, the light will find you." Her words became our new. I did not know what to say. The child in me wanted to cry out, to tell her of every lonely night, every tear shed in silence. But the woman in me looked at her trembling hands and saw not the monster of my past, but another broken soul. I whispered, "I forgive you." And in saying it, I freed myself more than I freed her. Now, as the fire warms my face and the snow falls beyond this camp, I realize something important. Life did not steal my dignity. It tried, yes, but it did not succeed. My stepfather's cruelty did not define me. My mother's blindness did not erase me. I am still here, breathing, telling my story. That is my victory. When people look at me, they see an old woman with lines on her face. They do not see the battles I have fought, the nights I almost gave up, the years I rebuilt myself from ashes. But when I speak, when I share this story, I let them see. Not to make them pity me, but to make them understand. Survival is possible. Healing is slow, but real. And silence. Silence can be broken. If you are listening to me now, child, remember this. You are stronger than the shadows that chase you. You are more than the pain that tried to break you. And one day, like me, you will sit by a fire, look back at all that tried to destroy you, and you will say, "I am still here. I survived. I lived." As the years stretched into decades, I carried my story not as a chain, but as a torch. What once weighed me down began to light the path for others. The little girl who had been silenced became the old woman who refused to remain quiet. I spoke when someone was ignored. I stood when someone was threatened. And slowly, I became known not for my wounds, but for my strength. People began to come to me, not because I was special, but because they sensed that I understood. Young women, frightened boys, widows, mothers, each brought their grief to me like offerings of broken glass. And though I could not fix their lives, I could listen. Sometimes listening is the only medicine, the only bridge between despair and survival. I gave them what I never had, a witness. There were nights when I still woke up shaking, the echoes of old terrors clawing at my chest. Healing is not a straight road. It bends, it twists, it doubles back on itself. But every time I rose after falling, I proved to myself again, I am not my past. My scars are not cages. They are proof that I endured. When my hair turned silver and my hands grew lined, I thought perhaps my story had finished. I thought perhaps I had given all I could. But life had one more gift for me. One day, a young girl from the village, the same girl I had once comforted, came back, grown, strong, her voice steady. She told me she was studying to become a teacher. She said, "Because of you, I believed I could live. Because of you, I knew I was not alone." Her words poured into me like sunlight, into the cracks of an old wall. I realized then, survival was never only about me. It was about all the lives my survival would touch. The cycle of silence was breaking, one voice at a time. In my quiet moments, I often speak to that little girl I once was. I tell her, "You did not endure all of this for nothing. You carry the weight so others could be free. You lived so that others might find courage in your living." Now, as I sit here, firelight dancing on my face, the snow still falling outside, I want you, the one listening, to remember this. Pain is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your strength. What is broken can still hold beauty. What is lost can still give birth to hope. Do not believe the voices that tell you you are worthless. Do not believe the fear that says you cannot rise. Look at me. I was a child silenced, a girl betrayed, a woman scarred. And yet here I am, with my voice, with my truth, with my dignity intact. One day, you too will sit with your memories. Some will hurt, some will heal, and some will simply exist like old scars on your skin. But when you speak of them, speak with courage. Do not hide. Do not be ashamed. Your story is not weakness. It is your power. This is the last lesson I leave you. Survival is not enough. You must live fully, fiercely, unapologetically. You must take the life that tried to break you and turn it into a testament of resilience. And when you can, pass your torch to another. Let them see that fire can burn even in the coldest winters. Because in the end, I am not just a woman who suffered. I am a woman who endured, who forgave, who rose. My life is proof that even in darkness, light can be found. And now, as my story finds its final words, I leave you with this truth. If I could survive, then so can you. If I could rise, then so will you. And that is the legacy of my life.